sometimes you need some sort of reassurance that everything will be okay. From the dialogues, the effects of child marriage and FGM came out very clearly and inspired very many young people to work harder to change their communities. The youth movement gave young people a sense of responsibility to ensure harmful cultural practices in their homes, neighborhoods, and villages, and community at large ends. Because once we learned that if you sort of co-create, or you're the heart and soul of a network, and you're, let's say, an NGO, CBO, there's a sense of sort of the young people feel this is not our own. So they'll sort it, they will handle it, and they'll do it. But once young people are actually the heart and soul and the engine of the network, then there's a sense of responsibility in that, what are we doing? How far are we? They really have their checks and balances, but within their own systems. The Accelerator project has provided a platform for young people to lead change, and through the stand-up speaker model, as I'd explained earlier, the young people, the youth activists developed a plan to conduct activities in different areas, and as I'd earlier alluded to, the young people just came up, they'll just give us a call, we are having such a meeting in this area, would you be available to attend? And if not, they'll just run with the whole program and later share their lessons from that without having anyone sort of from any NGO, CBO to take them through that. From the project, there was a renewed high-level commitment from leaders from both Kenya and Tanzania on tackling cross-border FGM and child marriage. As I'd earlier said, this was a really thorny issue for a long time, but from this project, both Kenya and Tanzania and high-level really commitments came out through, and a specific special sort of achievement that really happened during the period is, during FGM, there was sort of a special pass. You know how chaotic crossing the border can be. So imagine a vulnerable girl is trying to run away from FGM child marriage, and there's this, procedural, systems that have to be in place. But from the project, there was sort of a special pass in that any vulnerable girl, either from Tanzania or Kenya, can cross over seamlessly because of the need and because of the vulnerability that we acknowledge our region has. There's also a development of the advocacy strategy, which was very important. So the highlight, I'll just go through really quickly. The highlight, young people were able to facilitate sessions, that I said, creating the coalition of the young people. This was just between Migori, but there's another coalition. Sort of, it's not a network, it's just a coalition of young people from Tanzania and Kenya who really sort of really tell us what is going on. So, hey, in Tanzania, this is what is happening. I think we are at risk. I think we should be ready for, it's an informal setup, but it's very effective in that if anything happens in Tanzania, we're very sure the young people will have knowledge of the same. So lessons learned. Inclusivity and participatory strategy is having a realistic time expectation of various stakeholders and partners involved in the project, because naturally everyone is enthusiastic at the beginning, but the project, then, reality kicks in. But so in the process of, we all have expectations, then you get to the ground and things are different. So we have to be really inclusive and participatory. Working closely with the stakeholders in all sub-counties was really important for us, because during this period we even worked with the Ministry of Health, and this really strengthened how we even did things, because at some point you'll just get a call because our partnership has been very close, and there's no feeling of someone is overshadowing the other. So you'll get really important information. Community-led interventions led to sustainable and long-lasting change, because, as I said, the young people really were the heart and soul of the project. So even after the project, because the project, we had the closure sometime in March, and even now that the project is no longer here, such conversations are still going on, because the youth, the young people are really the heart and soul, and are even continuing with the discussions. The do no harm interventions was really key, in that I'm coming to the community. I'm not coming because I know everything. I'm coming so that we have a discussion. Given that this has been going on for a long time, what have we learned from it? How can we change? How can we improve? So the no harm approach was really critical, and it also gave us some sort of community acceptance, because someone knows I'm not coming because I feel I'm superior than you. I'm just coming because let's have a discussion around child marriage, FGM, and all these other issues. Flexibility and effective preparations were really key. And also allowing the community to change, to lead the change. Because as much as we have our timelines, but if the community is not at the heart and soul of bringing the change, then at the end of the day we'll be very frustrated. And recommendations, from the activities done, various recommendations were shared, and I think I'll just highlight I'll just go through them really quickly. Community targeted dialogues were with various segments of the community to facilitate conversations on ending child marriage. As much as we were doing intergenerational dialogues, after that we had to do follow-up dialogues with a specific group of the community that we felt were a bit skeptical about the conversation. Addressing other harmful cultural practices within the community, like nyumbamboke and female genital mutilation. As I said, some of these issues are really cross-cutting. Like in our region, after the implementations, we learned that child marriage has, there's also another cultural practice that fuels it, which is nyumbamboke. And for all of you who don't know, nyumbamboke is where an older woman marries a younger woman to bear her children so that her lineage is continued. And during these setups, most of the young girls are really vulnerable in terms of education, poverty. So once she's married in such a setting, the woman has no obligation to take care of her, right? So it really propels the cycle of child marriage and poverty and such issues. So the other one was strengthened social support for girls, like girls' safe spaces in villages, which is very important and continues to be a very integral part of our programming, in that there's a safe space where girls can come and just share stories, share what they're going through, and also get sort of a listening ear. Strengthened community surveillance system to prevent and respond to child marriage. And this is a very unique aspect because you know how community surveillance sounds like a very big thing, but once we reduce it in that we started from the women chamas, najua merry-go-rounds. And the women from that groups, we just come, train them on community surveillance so that they are very able to first identify vulnerable girls. They also understand the referral pathways, and then that's it. There's so much prevention before the actual, be it FGM or child marriage takes place. The other one should be on making churches safe spaces, and not only during the rescue times, but always. Just the girls knowing they'll always go to church and they'll find a safe space or any other area, any other center in their village, and they'll be heard, and it will be a safe space to share their pains and what they're going through in life. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'd take questions if there are any.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Leila, mental health advocate, among other things. So my question is, when you are talking about creating safe spaces for these girls to be heard, what do you mean by safe spaces? Just sharing stories, or in what context?
In our context, safe space means it includes sharing stories, and around mental health. There's a new. We're also learning about mental health and the need of that. So there's a component of mental health in terms of. So you're sharing your story. How does that affect you? Are you in a safe space? From your story, do you need to be rescued? How does that look like? So it's a very holistic. It doesn't just end on sharing stories. You share your story, and from that, and it's not really. This is a safe space where you just come and share stories. We go a step at a time. if you just want to come and sit, and because during those circles, there's also someone who really, we just talk about random things. And during that time, if you feel like you need to share, then you share. And from that, we follow up. Now that you've given us this, are you in a good space? Should we sort of find out a way of getting you out of that space? Or what else can we do as an organization to ensure you're really good, if that answers. Thank you.
Yeah, Lydia from Media. Kudos to whatever you're doing in the community. Now, I have a question. Since you started the implementation till now, the project has ended. What is the situation currently in queer community, especially on the issues pertaining to FGM and child marriage?
Thank you so much. So from the implementation and around FGM and child marriage specifically, because we've had during the implementation period, we've had really much needed discussions and conversations with people. So unless there's the new survey, but if I could say it myself, I think there's been a positive change on even in terms of how people just view the whole aspect of child marriage and FGM. People are beginning to move away from it's cultural, we must do it, and people are having really honest conversations. And even around Easter, there was a big scare of FGM possibly taking place. And it began because it usually begins with the boys, then girls follow right through. So when the boys began, and we were like, okay, here we are again, we have to work against that. But it just happened, then it stopped. I don't know why, but it stopped. It didn't happen. So I would say, one, the NGOs, CBOs are really doing an amazing job. And secondly, the community is actually beginning to question. Because when we were having conversations with Mzee wa Kimila, he was saying, yes, we should be ready to stop. We are ready to stop. But then if a mama brings her daughter to us, you know, how can we say no? But from that experience, for those who have heard about the Easter period, I think if it began and it stopped, we're actually doing a good job. So I think all of us are doing a good job in Korea. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecil. It's a very good presentation, and you did a good work in Korea. I know from data, Tanzania, the cases of child marriage in Tanzania are more than in Kenya, by almost 8%. And of course, this is confirmed from the presentation. One of the things that I took from the presentation, which confirms again the data that we know out there, is that because of the stricter rules in Kenya, children are moved to Tanzania for child marriage. And when that happens, it introduces another possible exploitation of children, which is child trafficking. So I wanted to hear then, when it converts itself to that nature of child trafficking, how do you go about that now that you're even working with cross-border coordination methods?
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. That is a very sticky issue, I'll say it myself. But during the implementation period, children from Kenya usually get through to Tanzania for FGM or child marriage. And that was because in Kenya, systems are very tight. And so the our Tanzanian counterparts could not really, I wouldn't say their systems are not tight because they have their own laws, but I think this was an issue of discussions. Because after the discussions, even they're called Mkuu wa Wilaya, it should be the DC, from their area. They're like, no, people come here with a letter from allowing them to go visit someone in Tanzania. So when someone shows you a letter, you wouldn't really dispute that. So the cross-border sort of movement of children, be it for FGM, for child marriage, has really become an issue that even the Tanzanian people are really concerned about. So I think for now, from the project, it was really important for just all of us to understand. And because for a long time they were saying we are the problem, the Kenyan side, and we are saying they are the problem. But now we are sitting on the same table, And I think we are good. We are really doing an amazing job, because even now, if something happens in the coalition I was telling you about, someone will say 6 children have been found in Tanzania who are Kenyans, and this is the process, and they're in this location. So I think there's been a really tighter way of handling the issue, and given time, it's bound to really give really great results. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You're doing a very good job, Mrs. Sana and Julia. And I have 2 questions. One question is around sustainability. You say that you've already phased out the project. I'm wondering what you have in place to ensure sustainability of the achievements that you've made so far. And the other question is, what would you say was your wow moment or light bulb moment or learning that you feel toward the implementation of this project? This is something that stood out, a learning that you can also pass to other actors to run with it. So if you can tell more about this.
Okay, thank you. So the first question about sustainability. As I'd said, during the implementation of this project, the young people were really the heart and soul of the project in terms of programming, activities, and even now after it has phased out, the young people still conduct dialogues in the community. So it's a continuous process. It wasn't, we are doing this because Msichana is here, or there's a project here. But now that it has phased off, the young people are actually taking lead. Because initially, it was sort of a training phase for the young people in terms of how to handle the community, how to, the entrance point of the community. Excuse me. The entrance point of the community. So now that it has phased off, it's still sustainable because we are not there as the organization, but conversations around child marriage and FGM are still going on. So I think and I think I'll join my answer with the next question, which is, what is something we've learned through the implementation? Involving young people. Don't just involve them. Young people should be the heart and soul of the project because, everything comes, everything faces off. But once, excuse me, once young people are the heart and soul of the project, there's still continuity of the project. Conversations will still go on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Cecilia. I believe a round of applause is beautiful. Thank you so much. Personally enjoyed your presentation. And now, of course, today I told you we're going to be starting off with an amazing panel. Today, a high-level panel. I will let our dear sister to introduce the panel, and she also joins us in the panel discussion. So, a round of applause for Esther people.
Our first panel today is going to be looking at young people at the center. So how young people are propelling accountability to end harmful practices within whatever space they occupy. But before we have the panel with us, we will be having an opener by Vania Kibu. Oh, okay. A slight change. So we have the panel first, and then the opener should come after, right? Am I right? Apologies.
Changes in progress.
All right, so no, we're going to start with the child marriage panel. Sorry. Yeah. Child marriage panel, which has not changed. All right. Okay. So the child marriage panel, which is going to be looking at successfully addressing FGMC and child marriage. We just had a presentation from Cecilia. I will be calling her back on stage. Cecilia Ndegwa, Msichana Empowerment Korea, please join us. Then we have Lydia Kerato Chacha, Chairperson of the Steering Committee of the Nyanza Initiative for Girls' Education and Empowerment, NIGE. Followed by the only gentleman in the panel, Denis Ratemo, Program Manager, Trendezon. And finally, oh no, not finally, we have Gondwe Yawe Grace from Power to Youth, Malawi. And finally, Manjiro Ahome, Executive Director, Samburu Girls Foundation. So those are our esteemed panelists. And our very able moderator for the day, Patricia Macau, VSO, I hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And good morning. So today's in this panel, we will be discussing issues of child marriage and FGM and how we can successfully address this. And this comes rightfully after the presentation by Cecilia from Msichana Empowerment Korea, and from also discussions that we had yesterday. I don't know if you can remember what the prevalence was for child marriage and FGM in Kenya specifically. Anyone who can remember the prevalence? It was 31, 21. That is for child marriage or FGM. How about child marriage? 23, right? And then there was a caveat. What was the caveat to that? That we need to look at it at times context specific, isn't it? Like in Korea, what is the prevalence? 80, 84, right? Right? Yeah, so we start our discussions from that background, and with me I have very able panelists. So I will take a seat and let them take us through which one? Sorry, which one is it? Oh, this one. Sorry. That's okay. All right. So we have to use 2 microphones. So I will join the panelists, and they were already introduced briefly, but as they give us their points, I will request them to do another round of introduction and give us more information of who they are. All right, so I will start with Lydia from NIGE. So Lydia, we know that prevention of child marriage and FGM is very important. What preventive mechanisms should government of Kenya put in place to ensure that FGM, child marriage, is prevented and women, girls, are protected from these harmful practices? Yeah, sorry, I have to move.
Yes, I'm Lydia Kerato Chacha from Nyanza Initiative for Girls' Education and Empowerment, that is NIGE. My home county is Migori, that is Kuria region, so I'm a Kurian. Yes, so child marriage and FGM are key things that we really need to focus on, especially in the region where I come from, just the way my sister has said, that we are improving in terms of FGM and child marriage. And a question has come that what can the government do? What can the government do in order to curb FGM and child marriage in Kenya? As we answer this question, I'll wish you also ask yourself a question that what are you doing? What are you doing as an organization towards the same? Because we learned yesterday that we ought to move together in order to get good results. So the first thing is free, compulsory, and quality education. Free, compulsory, and quality education. The government, if gives an opportunity for girls to go to school without necessarily having issues with school fees, you realize that in the communities that we come from, most of the times girls and boys are sent for school fees every week to fetch school fees from home. And you realize that because of the high cost of living, some don't even have this money at the home, so the parents cannot afford their school fees. And also, mostly in our Korea community, if there is no enough cash to take care of both the boys and the girls, so the boys are given the first priority. So you'll be told as a girl, because there's no school fees enough for both of you, the girl is forced to get married so that the dowry is used to pay school fees for who? For the boy. And some girls, because of the poverty level, also tend to say that the only solution here is child marriage, because I can't continue with this stigmatization. I can't continue with these issues of coming home all the times, fetching school fees. That is a live example for myself. If the organization was not there for me, take me through the education till university, if I didn't have someone to tell me that, Lydia, you can make it, you can get the first class honors just like other people, then I wouldn't have been here. I wouldn't have been able to attain the first class honors. But because the organization was there for me, I made it. So I'm saying that if the government can make this education free, then it will be a leeway to help those girls who cannot afford education to be able to get an opportunity to also continue with school. And as an organization, we are sponsoring girls on the same. Number two, it is true that our curriculum has life skills. That is the education curriculum. But then, because it's not examined, some of us tend not to focus much on that. And also, I will wish that if the government could ensure that the life skills lesson is also examined and also expand to also cover lessons for FGM, to create awareness all over. Sometimes we could be at the grassroots level trying to advocate against FGM and child marriage, but if they're not in the curriculum, some of the communities who do not practice may say that is not our problem. But if it is taught in school also, it will help a lot, even in creating awareness and also curbing child marriage and FGM. Number three, the family life forums in our community level. I don't know about you, but for myself, sex is hardly mentioned with our parents. Is it true? Sex education is not taught in our families. And also, parents do not even understand the effects of FGM that we're talking about. Recently, we conducted some dialogue with our parents, and we were telling them that people ought to enjoy their conjugal rights in marriage. And they're saying that, what do you mean by enjoyment? And I just asked a simple question, that how long does the conjugal right last? You know what I'm talking about? Yes, and they said 3 minutes, and I was okay. 3 minutes. You know why? They are cut. They don't know the meaning of this enjoyment. To mean they are making their girls undergo FGM without really knowing the effect or how it's affecting them. So if we have forums being sponsored by the government, where the community, through the local administration, are brought on board, taught on how to take care of their children, how to teach their children, and how educate them more on the effects of FGM, then that means that child marriage and FGM will be capped in our communities. The fourth thing is building more schools and rescue centers for girls who escape from the harmful practices. It is true that rescue centers are temporal, but they're really helping. My sister can bear me witness that currently in Korea, when it's FGM period, you'll receive calls. Nowadays, they call us that I have a girl, I don't want her to be circumcised, where can I take her? So to mean that if the government can build at least one rescue center in Korea community or any other region that will help us rescue these girls who want to be rescued. You know, when they come to the rescue center, there are these things called life skills they learn. They are taught on how to take care of themselves and how to fight for their rights. It really enables them to face their lives in future. And then the last one that I will say is that good implementation mechanisms. It is true that the cross-border is a challenge in our community over there, and it's also true that we've got laws, legislation that takes care of the girls, the children's rights. But then you could present a case and you'll wait for it to be acted upon, wait until you get tired. Or the system is too long that you even lose hope. Of getting help. So if the laws are really implemented the right way, then I think we'll have a better society. I think I'll stop at that point.
Yes, thank you so much, Lydia. Very good points there. Let us give her another round of applause. And yes, she says the issue of rescue center. I think this has been repeated over and over, and it is a reality in Korea, Migori County. VSO, we also implement activities, project there, still on the girl child, and this has also come up over and over again that we need rescue center, and I think this is something that the government can really take it up and run with it, isn't it? Yes, so thank you so much. So very good points and very well articulated, 5 of them. I hope you've taken note of that. So the next speaker is Cecilia from Msichana Empowerment Korea. So Cecilia, we say that funding is important to ensure that prevention and response initiatives are effective. CBOs, as the frontline organizations providing much needed services to communities, are often poorly funded. How can CBOs be better funded to be able to provide effective services to the community? Another question, how should government agencies collaborate with CBOs to ensure accessibility and availability to preventive and response services? To you, Cecilia. Sorry, I keep on forgetting.
Thank you very much. As you have rightly put it, funding is very important. And because of funding, very many projects collapse. Very many needed interventions cannot pull through because of really poor funding, restricted funding, etc. So what can we do, what can donors do to ensure CBOs who are doing amazing work are properly funded. One of it is donors just really listening to the CBOs, because community-based organizations and NGOs have what I would call contextual advantage, because I'm from Korea. Msichana is based and works in Korea. So we fully understand the needs and the context from where interventions need to come from and angles, as opposed to having a donor who comes in with their own priorities, their own timings, their own wants, and all they say is, Msichana Korea, shape in. This is what we want, shape in. So what I would really think would be very important, because sometimes you find very many organizations opt not to go through with the funding because it's not really what the community needs, and it will not really fulfill their objectives. So, for example, once a funder comes in and they say our funding is restricted on FGM alone, and we know FGM is a cross-cutting issue. From FGM, there's child marriage. And once that happens, we need to have referral mechanisms that actually enable vulnerable girls to access, be it rescue, be it prevention, be it aftercare, So I really think donors need to start listening to the CBOs and what those communities really need. That's one. The other one is we need to have long-term funding that fund both the core and programmatic areas, because you'd really find most funding opportunities really are really based on programmings, and we need to grow. And if you cannot fund the core of the organization, in a way, you're pushing them behind, because as time goes, an organization needs to grow in terms of capacity. They need to be capacity built, because we an organization, you cannot just restrict the organizations on only programs. And as times move, there are also emerging issues. There are, opportunities to grow in terms of capacity. So a really important part would be long-term funding that fund the both two areas. And my last point would be working in partnerships. In terms of, we don't have to have these NGOs here, or the funders here, or the donors here, then NGOs and CBOs at some level, because we'll have the power dynamics are really not checked, which brings a problem in terms of, since you're up here, I cannot come and say, no, you know what, we thought that would work, but it's not working. We need to rechange, we need to rethink, because, there's the power dynamics are very, put me at a very disadvantaged position as an organization, as CBOs, as NGOs, and also in terms of building capacity, because we thought this would happen, but now, things happen on the ground, as I'd said, things happen. And once we are not on the same level, we're not working as partners, it becomes a problem, because now I have to shape in or shape out. So I think working in partnerships would really improve the funding opportunities, because this would mean you're coming in as a partner, and I'm able to tell you, we need capacity building in this area. We need this to be done for effective effectiveness of the project or programming, and also that would mean we'll also be able to collect and publish true and correct data for even future programming and how the various programs will be handled. Thank you.
Yeah, while you still have
yes.
there, maybe you can tell us about government collaboration.
I think government collaborations, that what can be done really, I would just really reiterate on the third point, which is partnerships, because a lot of, many times there's sort of a power struggle, because someone feels they're on a certain level and another person is on a certain level. So the power struggles really derails even implementation of very many programs. So I think partnership is king in every sense of the word. Once we are partnership and we know we are working towards the same goal, then even our mentality shifts. Because I'd be very open to say, you're failing in this area, and maybe resources or whatever reasons, how can I chip in, because I'm your partner? So I think partnerships is king. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecilia. Can we applaud her? Thank you so much. Yes, and I think one thing that she said that is really very good is the CBOs have the contextual advantage, isn't it? Yes, and we need to take advantage of that. So our next speaker is Denis Ratemo. You will introduce yourself. And Denis, education plays an important role in protecting girls from FGM and child marriage by giving them freedom and independence to choose their future path. How can the government capitalize on education to change social and gender norms, as well as empower students to eliminate these harmful practices in their generation?
All right, thank you so much. And it's exciting to represent the boy child in this heavily female-loaded panel. My name is Denis Ratemo. I work with Terre des Hommes Netherlands. It's an international child rights organization. And I serve as the program manager for Kenya Country Office. It will be very exciting to talk about education and the role it plays. And definitely then what the government would need to do to capitalize on education in terms of this. I would even broadly talk about ending violence against children. One of the things that I must confess is that all those people who've stood on this podium to talk about their passion and whatever they're doing to fighting some of these gender and social norms that present harmful practices, it's because they are enlightened, it's because they are undergoing education. That is a common thing that I observed among those people. So what that tells us is that education plays a role as an empowerment tool. And when we talk about empowerment tool, there are two things that I think about education. Allow me to use Cecilia, my sister here, as an example. There are two things that education will do to Cecilia. The first one is education would remove Cecilia from the community. And the second thing is that education will remove the community from Cecilia. The second role is what we'd want to see, because there is someone who talked about yesterday that a lot of these things that we talk about and we think that they're happening in the rural communities, they're actually happening in the informal settlements of the towns we were living. And for me, I equate that to be someone who's educated, but still the communities within them. So they're practicing the same social and gender norms that present those harmful practices that are not that are detrimental to the children, that perpetrate some form of violence to the children. So the first thing is that then what we need to do is work it out and structure our education to empower our people and remove that community from them. And there are so many ways of doing that in terms of the imparting of the knowledge, the kind of knowledge that is being imparted, and the structure itself in terms of even having it's called knowledge sharing and cross-learning of this or rather exposure. So that would be the first thing that I talk about in terms of what really education does as an empowerment tool. The second thing is I know people talk about it's a social vaccine, it's a social protection, which is very true. Because then when you talk about a social protection, think about when COVID came, schools closed for about 9 months. And during this time, let me say over 159 teenage pregnancies were reported. Those are those that were reported. There could be a whole number that was not reported. This happened because kids were out of school. We were not told, or rather we don't have a number of how many of those then underwent FGM, or how many of those children then were forced into early marriage, what we're calling child marriage. In the same period, in 2020, when kids went back to school after the 9 months, there was a conversation from a government report that 1.8 million children in Kenya who were in school before COVID could not be accounted for. No one knew where these children were. So that's another thing that really education. But I know there's a speaker who talked about that yesterday in terms of, but the mere fact that children are in the education system, it provides that social protection. The third thing, it will be a stabilizer or a unifier. There is a tendency of people looking at their culture to be superior to other people, depending on maybe their practices, their norms, their beliefs, and stuff like those. But then, when people are introduced to education, and they're sharing the learnings within the education sector, it stabilizes everyone. It unifies people. And at that point, definitely then we start even seeing things to do with even the discussion that we're having here today. The kind of conversation that Cecilia presented from the conversations young people are having when you have young people at the center. And at that point, then we get to a point where we start to talk about how to address the gender and social norms that perpetrate this kind of violence. But then the question then becomes, what should the government do in terms of taking advantage of education to help address this? And when I think about education, I always say that there are a few things that have got access in almost every single household in this country. One of those is a phone. When you talk about phone penetration, it's over 90%. At least almost so many households have got access to a phone. The second thing that is in almost every household is education. Because then when you think about primary enrollment or enrollment in primary schools, the government reported that we've got an enrollment rate of up to 93% in 2020. That could be higher in 2021. So it means that education has got access to over 90% of the household in this particular country. So what then I think the government, and I like what Kerato talked about in terms of ensuring that all children are in school, I would say that the aspirations are there in terms of 100% enrollment, 100% transition, all kind of things. So the thing is putting structures to support that. Because even as we talk about 100% transition, that is not happening a whole lot. Because, for instance, there are so many primary schools in Kenya, but when you think about the secondary schools that need to be receiving kids from primary schools, there are fewer than the primary schools. And a case in point is Mombasa, for instance, where you've got almost over 90 primary schools and only 30-something secondary schools. So then the question becomes, even as we talk about 100% transition, where are these kids going to? So the government needs to invest in infrastructure to support this kind of transition that we're talking about. Retention will be another thing, of course, because there are cases of dropout and things like those. Today, as we talk about free primary education or free secondary education, I don't think that there is education that is free today. There are those hidden educational costs that parents are still incurring. And some of those are what is making parents not to take kids to school. And in case, then start thinking about, because I cannot take this girl to school, the next thing is FGM, the other thing is, because of course once you've undergone that, is a child marriage. So I would say that infrastructure and support in terms of 100% of this enrollment transition will be very critical for the government to do. The second thing will be investing in what we are calling non-cognitive skills. And I know she talked about it. Today in schools, the emphasis is on academic performance, which is the cognitive skills. But there is the bit of the non-cognitive skills, which is the life skills of this world that we're talking about, the values, the social norms, and those kind of things. The government should take advantage of the population of children in school. 10.2 million in primary, 3.5 million in secondary. To impart them with the right skills to be able to actually lead this conversation. Because again, when Cecily was presenting, one of the wow moments that you asked was the child-led or initiative or involvement of the young people. Let them lead the conversation, empower them to be able to have this conversation from the center. So that will be very critical. Second last will be the aspect of parental involvement. That I know, like for instance, government has developed quite some guidelines, manuals around parental engagement, parental empowerment. But we know that the bigger conversation in the Kenyan context is that we've got quite some policies, but implementation is where there's a challenge. It's either resources, capacity, and things like those. But the thing is, let a government again take advantage of the caregivers that they can access from education to engage in this parental empowerment and engagement. Because all these things happen in a community context, and the same parents are the ones who then propagate the kind of gender inequalities that we were told about yesterday, that for us to end child marriage or FGM, we have to address the gender inequalities in the communities. So I feel that if we implemented that parental engagement empowerment manual that was developed and reach out to parents such that parents become protectors of their children and have this notion of, as a parent, my primary role is to provide education to my child and not to provide early marriage to my child. That will be something that will go a long way. Of course, lastly is the aspect of, I will not want to repeat that because of time, the adopting the multi-sectoral approach. The adoption is there. I would say that make it work. The aspirations are there. Let the government make it work, because the CSOs, we are here today, we're having this conversation. Yesterday, the common question that was being asked across is that how many government people do we have in this conversation, such that we are having this conversation together with them. Not have this conversation and start to think about as CSOs, now let's come together and then engage in advocacy. I think for me that is what would help. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Thank you so much, Denis, and yeah, feel appreciated. So, very good points there, well articulated. Education does not only remove the girl from the community, but it also does what? Removes the community from the girl, right? So that even if you move, say, from village X and you go to town B, you still have the ways of village X in you, right? But that is what education does, and it unifies. It's an equalizer, right? Yes, so the next speaker. Okay, sorry. Thank you. So our next speaker is Gondwe Yewo Grace from Malawi. So Gondwe, what are the meaningful and practical ways in which the government, CSOs, CBOs can give young people a voice in the process of eliminating FGM and child marriage? So yeah, the voice to the young people. What is your experience of working with adolescent girls in Malawi?
Thank you so much. My name is Yeo Gondwe, like you have said. Grace is my middle name. I'm working with Malawi Sexual Reproductive Health Rights Alliance as a program advocacy coordinator, specifically for the Power to Youth program. To answer your question, I think Africa as a continent, it is a youthful continent. And young people have been underrated for their potential to fulfill different agendas. So I feel like it's high time we move from taking young people as mere participants, but let them meaningfully take part in their issues that affect them. So I feel like the CSOs, governments should put young people at the center in order to change different issues that affect them. For instance, we can adopt the youth-led advocacy model, a model in which we are using as a part in Power to Youth program, where we are empowering young people in advocacy and human rights. Young people should be aware of human rights and how they can engage different policymakers in issues that affect them. So I think involving young people is really critical in eliminating eliminating harmful practices, as well as child marriages. My experience working with young people is that these people have the zeal to initiate, to influence change on issues that affect them. But the problem is capacity building. They need to be capacitated in order for them to take the critical action in eliminating these things, because they're the things that affect them. There's nothing for them without them. So we can't just be involving young people as mere participants. We have to meaningfully involve young people. So when we're talking about meaningful engagement, we need to invest as well to support the young people in different platforms where they'll be able to engage different policy makers in giving out their ideas on how they can influence change. In addition to that, I think apart from providing the platforms for advocacy, we can also give them the resources, the money themselves, for them to initiate different advocacy approaches in order to change issues that affect them. Just to add on that, I feel like economic empowerment is also crucial. We have been talking about poverty being the root cause of child marriages. In a context of Malawi, young people marry because maybe their parents want to get the dowry, because they don't have the resources. And young people also marry to find support to men. So I feel like we really need to address the root cause of child marriage if at all we are to achieve what we want to achieve. So my request to the government, to CSOs, is let's start thinking across what economic interventions can we push in order to tackle with the root cause of child marriages as well as other harmful practices. So yeah, that's my point. We really need to put young people at the center in advocating for change. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Gondwe. There's nothing for the young people without them, right? So we have to put the young people at the center of our interventions, and we have to resource them, okay? Nothing can move without resources. So, yeah, very well articulated. Let us give her another round of applause. Thank you. Our next speaker is Wanjiru Wahome, Samburu Girls Foundation. So Wanjiru, young people are the future leaders. How can CSOs and government meaningfully engage youth to accelerate the elimination of FGM and child marriage?
Good morning. Nisalimie tu kidogo. Good morning.
Good morning.
Where is Brian? Maybe he needs to come here and do something. Yeah, so my name is Wanjiru. I work in a county called Samburu. And I joined the organization way back in 2014. I know you might be wondering how. Born and brought up in Nairobi. I know when you look at me, I don't look like working in the village, right? Nakaa msichana wa Nairobi, but no. I met the founder of the organization just in an event like this one. But the interesting thing is there were young girls as young as 10, 11, 12 who are already mothers. Wanjiru is there, walked in, bought a ticket because it was a fundraiser. She was trying to fundraise and build her first dormitory because she was already tired of moving around houses with children. And what I saw, it made me, you know, at times when you feel like, what else can I do? Am I just going to walk out of that room? Of course, I gave my contribution, but what next? I was in the corporate world at that time. And after the event, I asked her, so how do you do this? And I told her, I've never been to Samburu, of course. Msichana wa Nairobi, you've never crossed, you know, you just feel like shida zimekuwa mingi, but you don't have much, you know. So I took a trip and followed her to Samburu, you know, took some off from work. And what I saw in Samburu, if you've been to Samburu, way back in 2014, my friend, it wasn't interesting. If you come visit right now, of course, to Konalami, it's so exciting. There's a tarmac road. And what I saw there is, I thought it was fiction. You know, at times when you hear a story and this one is just looking for money. You know, we keep on being told NGOs are just looking for what? A sad story, fundraise, get money, and go home, right? So when I went there, I thought it was only those 3 girls or 4 girls who were teenage moms. I found so many others. And I wondered, so what can I be able to do in my capacity? I came back to Nairobi so disturbed. You know, that when you're feeling like you have to move this mountain and you have to make it work, no matter what. I never even told my family I'm going to resign. So I resigned and, you know, crazy girl, go to Samburu. Meeting another crazy woman. I think you all know Josephine. And life began. Was it tough? Yes. Culture shock. Now you cry every day because you keep on rescuing girls. From what? From FGM, child marriage. Girls are defiled as young as 9, 10. You know where I'm coming from. You hear of teenage pregnancies at 16, 17. Here you're meeting a 10, 9-year-old. You know, I got depressed, but anyway, I felt like maybe I should go back. This one is not my field. And I was like, no, I think I need to do something at my capacity. And you know, when you're in the corporate world, it's 8 to 5. Same thing year in, year out. A bit boring, right? But now when you go to the other side, every day it can be breaking news. You don't know what is going to happen. You go to the office, you don't know what kind of a girl will walk into your office, or you don't know what emergency will be there. And I thought, I might not be a local, I might not be a Samburu, but I believe these are the same children from God. It's not about tribe, but what impact can you be able to make as an individual? It's been a journey, turning 9 years now at Samburu Girls Foundation. The founder of the organization has already transitioned to politics. A few months old as the ED. Have I made impact? A good story. You all saw Sarafina here. I call her my baby Sarafina. I met Sarafina when she had gone through a lot. And she joined in. And I was like, oh my God, this is a bright girl, had scored almost 370 marks. She had aspirations, had already a survivor. What else? Just about to be married off. Why can't we be able to work with her? And I've worked with her like my own child. And where is she right now? She's going to be the first girl in Samburu County to graduate as the first ever who's done mathematics. If I walked out, if I left Samburu today, I would be happy that I have so many other Serafinas that I have worked with. For the last 10 years, we celebrated 10 years last year, we've been able to rescue more than 1,500 girls. And I keep on saying, you might hear it's a girls' foundation, yes, but we also support boys, because I realized as much as we're not going to include boys in this conversation, we are losing it out. So something drastic happened last year. We had a huge celebration, a Kesima declaration on ending FGM and child marriage. It was amazing. But now then, but then again, you know, at times when you keep on working, you don't know what exactly you're doing. You're working blindly. Samburu County, as per the last KDHS 2014, because we still don't have the latest data, we are number 2 leading in Kenya at 86%. I know you're wondering, so after the declaration, so what next? I went round the whole of Samburu County trying to have conversations, not training. You know, at times also communities have already known, it's those guys coming, FGM, right? Simple. Asking them questions. Do you think this thing has ended? Yeah, tunaona hii maneno imeisha, but what is the situation at the ground? What is our approach as implementing partners? Do we sit and go back to the same community we are working with and ask them basic questions like, how do you envision your community to look like? At the end of the day, as Wanjiru, I would want to see FGM end in Samburu counties. Are our communities ready? You seated here today as an implementing partner. Are you doing it just to tick boxes? Because Adona gave you some grants? After 2 years, 3 years, you're done and you're gone? At the end of the day, where are we leaving the community? And then when I went round and, trying to start conversations, and we were asking them, especially young people, what do you want to see, or what do you like? And they would mention like 1,000 things. What don't you like? I always thought FGM and child marriage would be number 1. Shock on me, it was always the last one. Like by the way, na kuna hii FGM inatusumbua. You're talking of like, but where is Wanjiru and other development partners? FGM is number 1 crucial thing that needs to end. And I felt like, I think it's time we realize we are doing what the communities don't want. Their priority, there's been drought for the last 2 years. Is it hunger or is it ending FGM? What is their priority? Of course, they will fill your meetings and they'll come and attend. But looking for what? For that allowance of 200 shillings or 300 shillings to go and feed their children. But have you ended FGM? I didn't want to talk about MSA, to talk about GTA. At times we talk big words. But trust me, the situation on the ground is different. Have we made a stride? Yes, we have. Do we need to change our approach? We urgently need to change our approach. Otherwise, we will talk about FGM and child marriage in the next 30 years. So how do we involve the youth? I started a movement last year, especially after the declaration, working so closely with the Youth Anti-FGM Network, Kenya. And I felt like it's time. Everyone in meetings that we go to, they keep on saying, you need to work at the grassroots level. Conversations around development. Because remember, I had already gone around the whole of Samburu County. People were not interested to end FGM. Of course, they knew it was a declaration. Serikali saizi iko ground, of course, kumaliza FGM. But is it their priority? Their priority, basic needs. Is the movement working right now? Yes, it is. Young people just need to be listened to. They have solutions. The other thing is on skills development. Something basic, like even youth funds. Young people at the grassroots level have no idea. They know it's that family of Wanjiru that needs to get, it goes to them. We have young people. This movement is not only about elites. I'm looking at that teenage mom who dropped out in class 6 and already has 2 children. Is she pro-development at the community level? Part of the movement. that same girl will not let her daughter go through FGM. And lastly, and my parting shot, long-term social change is more sustainable. It might be discouraging because it will take so many years, but with time, you'll be able to see results. But if we continue as implementing partners with the same approach, you want to come and tick the boxes that you've done 20 meetings, at the end of the day, you're leaving people the same way you found them, then we will be in this conversation for a long time. Thank you.
Wow. Yeah, we couldn't end this in a better way. One word from what Wanjiru has presented. Sorry. Yes, one word is what I see or what I hear from her is passion, right? Leaving what she was used, what was comfortable to go and help these girls. The other thing is we need to involve girls in conversations. They know where it pinches most. The priorities are different, and we need to listen to them, right? Yeah, so this brings us to the end of the discussions from the panelists, but it opens up for us to give any comments or questions that we have to the panelists based on what we've discussed here. Any questions? Any? Yeah, thank you. We have one there.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for the amazing comments. I really learned a lot with what you're going to share. I just want to make two comments, especially to the issue of CBO's funds. Thank you so much, Lady from Christian Empowerment, for the amazing work you're doing. And I was just interested maybe to add, I know that we're all looking forward to donors funding CBOs and the external or rather the private sector. But I'm just concerned that I think the government always comes first when it comes to funding. I think there's so much money that is being channeled to youth funds. There's so much money that is channeled to innovations, social enterprises. There's always money to loan youth-led innovations apart from CBOs, except CBOs. I think if you compare business and charity, charity should come first. Charity, we are helping people for free. We are seeking those. I'm listening to Wanjiru and I can imagine Kisima, and you're giving your life to young girls and women in exchange for nothing. But businesses are highly funded in exchange for money. There's any time that we lobby that we have a CBO fund, even if it's a loan. CBO fund from the government. We are advocating, not demanding, but I think it's about time we really see about a CBO fund. Many other times we reach out to the ministries or government agencies. If you're required as a young person, forget the money, then come partner with us. I think it's about time we really advocate that we have a CBO fund, especially as we go to the next government, and this can be implemented in so many ways. I think the way we are crafting policies, we can also craft policies that look forward to us. The other thing is about, it is part of the ICPD 25 ICPD 25 commitment, was number 8 says that we need to eliminate all forms of policy, legal, and programmatic barriers that are preventing us from participating in government policies and works. I think that is also another way to bring young people in the conversation. We cannot have the conversation when we have so many requirements that you have to have an experience of I don't know how many years. You need to be, nowadays it's about the age. We need a 27 plus, we want a 35 plus. And those are programmatic barriers that are preventing young people from high schools from setting up CBOs. Because the requirements, how many documents, structures are required for you to get funding? So many. How many, how many outreach reports you do have an experience of 10 years, but you only are passionate. And the whole of your life you spend in school, and now you just get excited, but you need an experience of 10 years. I think those programmatic barriers should be removed. So those are my 2 comments. I think increasing funding to CBOs, I really think we need a CBO funding. We need to eliminate all forms of programmatic barriers preventing us from participating. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think I don't have questions. I have comments as well. It was a very eclectic presentation from the panelists. I want to add on what my colleague Denis said on education, just a few comments. I think a lot needs to be done when we talk about how do we educate a country in different layers. And I felt it's important to add on the element of research. How do we collaborate? For example, as a civil society organizations, we have programs that have budgeted, costed on baselines, endlines, and all these rapid assessments. How do we share? Do we have frameworks on disseminating so that it makes meaning? And we incorporate learning institutions, for example, and I'm glad Hamrev is part of this, Hamrev International University, and other institutions of learning to cap it into research on these thematic areas so that it empowers even those, Denis talked about when an empowered individual from a communities, then education as a way of separating the two. So these people comes from a particular region, so it's important also to start thinking on these thematic areas incorporated in our research institutions, and of course partnership with our media. All these as cross-cutting issues, advocacy, research, partnership, so that we don't speak to ourselves. I like the point one of the panelists made, that, and I think it's Denis, that many times we speak to the converted. If you count how many civil society members, specifically government officials here, then it means we are, as much as it's a good forum for sharing, it also needs to mean a lot because we are partnering with governments, both national government and county governments. For example, we have people who travel from as far as Migori, giving us good information about what's happening in that county. How many government officials do we have, and maybe how many initiatives that particular organization is partnering with the county government. So our partnership with county governments, because we're talking about sustainability. All these projects that we're doing have lifetime, 3 years, 2 years, but governments have a way of living beyond the project. So it's important to start thinking about and focus around budgetary allocation with the counties, but also with the national government for purposes of creating that kind of synergy, sustainability, and of course, when we do, I spoke about research, how do we make sure that it reaches to the common man in the village where we come from. So our local media engagement, our national media engagement, social media, both print and electronic media, it's very important so that we are making some kind of change, meaningful change to whatever it is that we want to account. Thanks so much.
Yeah, and we had a hand here and another one there. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Those were thought-provoking conversations that we just had, and I'm grateful. So my comment is on education, and Mr. Ratemo, exposure is important, right? And the goal is to use education to remove the community from the student and not remove the student from the community. So my comment is maybe other than the normal basic education that we receive from class, maybe the government can incorporate other programs that can bring that exposure, the positive exposure to these students, especially those in primary school, because this is the age whereby they are trying to know what they want to become in the future, correct? And if we are being honest, most of these students hardly leave the villages. And they are born in a certain mindset society, they grow up there. So the lack of exposure makes them, as much as they have the education, they still are in that mindset. And if I can use the beautiful young ladies and gentlemen who are here that I am, by the virtue of them being here, they're being exposed to something that is different, right? And exposure brings a positive mindset. So maybe you can capitalize on education by incorporating other programs that can be tailored towards gaining exposure. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, yeah, I think this is the last hand that I've seen. And then there's another one. Right.
Thank you very much. I just want to support what Lydia and Retimo said. This is still about education. I'm a teacher, these are my students. I'm a CRE teacher, but I teach life skills. And as Lydia said that life skills should be examined. It is very true, it should be examined. We should also train teachers to teach life skills. And it should be given enough time on the timetable, just like other subjects, because we have only one lesson a week per class, and you go to that class once a week. You teach whatever you teach, and then you go back the next week again for one lesson. It's not enough. In fact, we also use weekends even to invite motivational speakers to come and talk to the girls so that they can have more of that life skills. Ratemo also talked about the government establishing, Lydia said about the establishment of rescue centers. These girls or boys are just safe in public schools as long as they are in school. So if you can make recommendations to the government, maybe to establish rescue centers, whereby these needy students who can't afford school kids in the boarding schools can go to their schools, which are free. Then they live in boarding schools that are government funded, so that the parents who don't afford the school kids those students can benefit in such rescue centers. So I wish you can recommend that. And I wish you can also maybe look for support from these CSS or PS and CAS, maybe in such forums, you invite them so that they hear what you feel about education, and I'm sure they can act on the points you give. Also, infrastructure. The government is really trying. I need to commend the government. They are building so many classes for the 100% transition. But as I say, the girls can only be saving. After that, when they go home, all those practices can be initiated on them. So, if the schools can be more established by building more classes, and it will cater for those many students living in class 8 and coming to high school. And then in areas where maybe FGM and child marriage is so common, that is where we need now the rescue centers. But in urban areas, I don't think we have these problems a lot. So mine is just to say, if there's a way you can involve the government and write a recommendation to them to do what you're telling us to do here, what you're suggesting here, it will be so good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I think this brings us to an end of, there's a hand. I think there's a last one hand. Do we have a hand? The last one? Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. I have a small problem with my gums, so forgive me if I will struggle a bit. Yeah, I wanted to speak to what was raised by someone yesterday and today about safe spaces in Korea. Actually, it works in Korea. We work in partnership with Consultative community. That is a network of women championing, all issues to do with violence against women and girls. In terms of safe spaces, this is just for information's sake. We have 3 schools. I may not be able to say the names at the moment, but we have integrated safe spaces within primary schools. And we have 3 safe spaces. At the moment, we have a safe resource and safe space that is under construction. It's about to be commissioned, I think, in the next 1 month. So we already have a safe space within Nyanza. So that is purely a safe space. What you people call a rescue center. I think when we talk about safe space, it's more sustainable because that is where someone will find safety as we sort out those other things. Based on what the panelists discussed, and particularly around education and the ATR, the alternative rite of passage, this really touches on girls that still go to school. But again, I look at alternative rite of passage as one way that, it's one way that we can employ, but can we do it in such a way that it empowers the girl and, in a more dignifying way? Not again, saying we want to save the girl, we want them to empower the girl, but yet still bring this girl out there to parade. This girl to justify to the society that I am okay, So we need to look at that. They don't have to be paraded to tell the community that I am a girl, I am a human being. They have rights just like any other person. And the last one is on a cadre that is almost left out all the time, girls out of school. Being cut is not the end of life. So how do we program around girls that are not in school? They are not even young mothers. They don't have children, but they are out there just because of the intersectionality issues we mentioned yesterday. Like the conversation is about new cuts, it's about don't cut. What about those who've been cut? What is their message, particularly those who are in school? We need to be very, even as we educate them, because we need to give them a second lease of life. So the message to those who've been cut and in school, what is the curriculum about those ones? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think we can have the panelists respond to some of the questions.
All right, thank you so much for the comments that have come from the participants. And I wanted to just reflect on what was said from there around exposure. And there's a comment that I gave around that there's a lot of aspiration from the government. I think what we ought to invest in is implementation. Because again, when she talked about investing in this exposure, it reminded me of a program again that the government worked on called Community Service Learning. This is a program that is meant to give children within school an opportunity to experience learning out of the classroom. And part of that is the kind of exposure that we're giving to the children who are here today. That community service learning should provide an opportunity to children to interact with children from outside their cultures, to be able to also experience what happens in the other cultures. So if that particular program then was to be given the priority and the investment in terms of resources, we'll also be able to expose a good number of the children, because like when you mentioned that, I remembered when you had a conference sometime in 2019, we brought a girl from Samburu who was in Form 3, where in a place called Doldol in Laikipia North, and I know there's someone who comes from Laikipia North in here. When she came to Nairobi, I think the most important thing that she kept on focusing on is looking at the tall buildings, and they were like, the only tall thing that I've seen is a tree. But in Nairobi, they were so excited. That was their very first time in Nairobi. You do not want a child who's growing to experience that kind of a life where that the only thing they know is their village and is their culture. So that when you go there, Cecilia, Wanjiru, and talk about changing their social norms, and that is all they've known, then it becomes the hardest task of all. So that exposure is something that, again, like Madam said, we need to give it more time, and we need to give it more investment in terms of its implementation. Thank you, and back to there.
Thank you. And give this to Wanjiru.
Yeah, I've had rescue centers being mentioned, and I think we've been one of the organizations that has had a rescue center for the longest time possible. But let me just tell you the truth. It's not easy to run a rescue center. It is not sustainable at all. It's short term. Something happened in 2020 when COVID happened. And the government had to close schools and closed rescue centers as well, not knowing, they didn't want to know where these children will go to. Remember, these are children who are at risk. Remember, back at home, issues, and you can't just go and dump them there. To be honest, I lost like almost 20 girls. They went, got married, some disappeared, just trying to see how we can be able to get them back. In terms of funding, which donor is going to walk in and give you money for food to run a rescue center? Which donor is going to walk in and give you money for school fees? Reality check. Rescue centers are good short term. Long term, it's not sustainable. If you have 100 girls that you're keeping at a rescue center, those girls need to eat. They need medical care. And you can imagine keeping 100 girls, adolescent girls, in one place. It can be chaotic. Some will wake up moody. Some will wake up and feel like they need to go back to their former husbands. It is crazy. Are we really sure we want to run rescue centers? Let's create an environment whereby we are training community members. It is your responsibility as a parent to raise your child. And we have a very strong reconciliation program. Nowadays, after the 2020, I only keep like 5 girls, 6 girls, but not at a maximum of like maybe 6 months. By then, I've already reintegrated them back to their family. Sit down with those parents, whether they know to write or not. Bring together a children's officer, bring together a chief, make them sign commitment letters and forms. I'm going to educate my daughter, and I'm going to keep her safe here in my house. It is your responsibility, because the moment we introduce rescue centers in this country, and in the 22 hotspot counties, we are losing it. We are telling the communities, continue with FGM.
Thank you. Thank you. Let us have Lydia respond to. We have the issue of CBO fund and also out of school children.
Thank you. I was to respond on girls out of school. In our organization, I believe that we are catering for that also. We've got a project that is looking into the issues that girls out of school face, and we're really trying to incorporate them where that we have programs that we subsidize their their fees in order to have to learn the life skill, the skills that can accommodate them in the society. On the issue of us incorporating life skills as well as FGM in the education, we are looking forward into a society that has zero FGM, that we no longer talk about FGM. And we have girls that are already cut, and we have the girls that are maybe likely to be cut. And so if they get, some of them go through these things because they don't know that they are being affected. So if we create awareness on this, those who are cut will become activists, will become they will be at the forefront also to say, yes, I went through this, but this is wrong. This is what I feel. This is how it is. And that girl who is not cut will be impacted. That, oh, so this is what people go through when they undergo FGM. And this we will change the perception of those who are thinking of being cut. Another thing on the issue of funding, then I will say that it's really a good thing to fund the CBOs. They have a lot to do, but they're restricted by limited resources. So if we get the government coming in to support, then we believe that together we can make a great change in our society. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, the eminent persons, the panelists that are here, and the plenary for actively participating in this conversation and the discussions that we've had. I think this brings us to an end of this session. And let us give them a round of applause as they leave the podium. Yeah, and I will give this back to the MC. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I believe everyone deserves a clap. If you're hungry and clap your hands. Yes, I know people are hungry. People are very hungry. And that's why I will not speak so much. Yes, I believe it is about time I release you all people to go and eat. Please, let's just, as always, if you are here yesterday, you know how to serve yourself breakfast. If you're not, breakfast is, or rather break, yeah, it's almost PM, so break is just outside, and kindly go have your meal for the next 20 minutes. Yes, for the next 20 minutes, and then we can come, resume our session. Today we're ending early, so yeah, it's break time, people. So now let's go have food, everyone, please.
There's two stations, so there's one on your extreme right, and there's another one right outside this door. Let's make haste, because we will be starting in 20 minutes.